Hello, I'm Michelle Leduc Catlin. Welcome to episode 7 of season 1 of Trued Up, the podcast that invites you to be the change. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. Like all great literary fiction, Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities resonates today as much as it did when he wrote it in 1859. As I reflected on my conversation with Dr. Chris Shaw, I kept thinking of that quote. We spoke back in October of 2023, just after the start of the war between Israel and Hamas. Being Jewish and having friends and family in both Israel and Palestine, Chris was understandably upset. The conversation began bleakly, with his own incredulity at the insanity in the world and his deep concern about catastrophes to come. But as we spoke, I discovered a man deeply committed to family and community, a man who, despite his dark view of the future, simultaneously holds humanity in high regard and refuses to succumb to the divisiveness being perpetuated all around us. Instead of destruction, Dr. Shaw puts his energy on creation. It was his creation of the Freedom Pledge, a document he wrote allowing each of us to declare who we are and who we shall be, that had me want to sit down with him for a conversation about what moves and motivates him to keep standing for and believing in human rights and dignity. The conversation did not disappoint. Dr. Chris Shaw is intellectually spry, fast-talking, and quick-witted. He is a deep thinker with a deep love for people, and he is my guest today on Trued Up. Welcome, Chris Shaw. It's good to see you.
You too.
So we were just saying before we started formally about literally all hell breaking loose in the world, and that you said friends and family in the Middle East?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. How are they impacted right now?
Oh, well, the ones in Israel are terrified and angry, and the ones in the Palestinian territories are terrified and angry. So, everyone's scared of everybody, and the level of dysfunction there between the different populations is so severe. It's very hard to see an outcome that is not going to be even more catastrophic than it's already been. I think my gut sense, like I feel like we've gone back in time and we're in August 1914 before World War I, with people picking sides based on sometimes, again, fear and anger, but sometimes just choosing a side. And I think we're on the brink of a world war. I think what's coming is going to be kind of beyond comprehension. It wasn't beyond comprehension for people who lived through World War I and II, but I think for a lot of us, it's going to be something we've never experienced. And, you see it with Ukraine and Russia, now the Middle East, and of course the ongoing stuff with the World Economic Forum, which I'm sure has got their paws in there somewhere. And, what their goal is for a one world controlled by them. These colliding forces, I think, are going to create a lot of havoc in the world as we know it. And that concerns me. I'm the father of 3 little children. I have some bigger ones, but I have 3 little ones. And my gut sense is that it's going to be very hard to keep them safe in the coming years. So the things that I have to do in the next little while is find ways to make sure that they get through it, whatever else happens. So sorry to be such a downer on your show, but it's hard to be up.
So much to be cheerful about. I mean, really, why would you pick those things, Chris?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. I'm just a pessimist, I guess. But, on the other hand, looking outside on a beautiful winter day, and all things good. But I live in a very peaceful place, and it's hard. When I put my little ones to bed at night, and watch them, in their little innocence sleeping. They cuddle up and they're adorable. It's hard not to feel kind of a sense of horror and fear for them based on what I know parents in Israel and Palestine are going through. Their children are not safe. Mine, we have the luxury. My children are safe, and when there's food and there's water and a nice warm house and no one's shooting at us. That's that's what it should be for everybody. And Palestinian and Israeli parents can't feel that way right now, or I guess Russian and Ukrainian parents, because you don't know what's coming tomorrow. Your house could be gone. You could be gone. Your kids could be gone, and it must be very, very hard for those people to live with that and find any joy in this time of year. And I think we were last night. I took my kids to their school, had a Halloween celebration, a pumpkin walk, and it was lovely. And good treats and lots of cute little skits. And again, I think we're so privileged here. We forget that a lot of people around the world are in really horrible, horrible straits, and they are not safe. And they, what they're looking forward to is probably more of the same and probably worse. So now if Israel is talking about pushing 2 million people into Sinai, you have a humanitarian catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. And of course, at some point, I think people on the other side of the house would like to repeat the same for the Israelis. So it's, where are the adults in the room? That's kind of what I'm beginning to think, where are the adults who are going to, and I think a lot of the adults in the room basically want this to happen. It's serving some purpose for them.
Yeah.
And again, it's always, there's an old African proverb that says when the elephants fight, it's the grass and the mice that get trampled. And that's what's happening.
I want to ask you, so where are the adults in the room? What's missing? That
rational.
Yeah. So where are the adults? Why are there not more adults?
Yeah. Well, I think we're here, but we're not being heard. And when people get, again, this is what we saw during COVID, right? During the pandemic, when people are so scared and so uncertain, they default into a very tribal narrative. So it's always us versus them, and them is always, they're always evil, and us we're always good. And the tribal narratives that we saw here, where the unvaccinated were treated literally as second-class citizens, and still are in many cases. The kinds of mandates the governments assumes enormous amounts of power that were never delegated to them. Thomas Paine wrote about this, in great detail. But difference between delegated and assumed authority. We live in a world that's become, I don't know if you know the term state of exception. State of exception was described by an Italian philosopher named Giorgio Agamben. And he basically said it's the place between laws where they just basically assume they can do certain things because they can, and they do. And they do more stuff, and they do more stuff. And you saw it during COVID, coming up with the regulation after regulation after regulation with no science whatsoever to back it up. And, governments defaulting into a totalitarian mindset, and a lot of people going along out of fear. And again, the way, we had even just recently our own public health officer, Bonnie Henry, here in British Columbia, again saying to people to stay away from the unvaccinated during the holiday. Don't invite them.
She just said that in 2023.
Yeah. And once again, she did it at Christmas last year, and she did it this year about our Thanksgiving holiday in October. And you think, wow, this is like still. And still people are doing it. Still people are so afraid. And
So
the lack of analysis, the lack of scientific knowledge. As an educator, this really perturbs me. A lot of people do not know how to do critical thinking. And it's, we have a prime minister who says, the Greek word aporia, which means internal contradiction, what you just said. So, if I say, my name is Chris Shaw, and everyone named Chris Shaw is a liar. Look, what are you going to do with that statement? And this, so Justin gets up and says, "Well, I can't." He said, "Well, this is a year ago," but he said, "I can't allow on the unvaccinated to sit in a train, or an airplane with the vaccinated with unvaccinated because although the vaccines are safe and effective." Like, what? Justin is not the swiftest deer in the forest. We know that. my
Yeah,
colleague.
but that's okay. But there are so many contradictions. Like, I mean, I was talking to somebody about that. What clued them in was, okay, so people can walk into my hotel, they have to wear a mask, but they sit
Yeah.
down and they take it off.
Yeah,
So,
because the virus, well, the viruses are very smart. These COVID-19 and all the variants they're brilliant because, and they have a certain kindness too, because when you're sitting down, if I'm drinking my tea, I'm safe. They will
Mhm.
not bother me. If I stand up, well, game's off, you know.
Well,
It's
they also have an incredible understanding of time. That's why there were curfews.
yeah, precise. Yes, they do. Yeah,
Right?
they do
Yes.
understand that.
Yes.
It's like, and again, you know, as an educator, and that's primarily what I am. I'm a professor, you know, in the university. And you know, the university didn't do all that well during COVID either. Their regulations were nonsensical, to say the very least, and clearly lacked any scientific, you know, basis for almost everything they did. And yet you think, well, how is this possible that people do not understand in any realistic way that these things make no sense? Our ability to, and again, you know, and it's reflected in politics. We get the politicians we deserve. We get politicians who simply do not understand science. They do not understand critical thinking. I don't know what they do understand, but except, you know, the next election, and their lust to stay in office. But it's almost like, you know, I hate to say this, but it's almost like you're looking at the collapse of civilization, because when all of a sudden people cannot think rationally, and you know, it extends to Ukraine and Palestine and, you know, Israel and Russia. People are not thinking critically. People on all sides of the issue are not seeing the humanity in the other people, and they are not thinking it through. So, for example, Israel goes in and does what it's doing in Gaza, and if it goes ahead and it looks like there is a plan to push all the Palestinians out of Gaza into Sinai, then what? Then, you know, so there, you know, what I was always taught when I was in the Canadian Army is that you ask the so what questions. What happens next? What do you do next? So what happens next? You got 2 million refugees in Sinai. Now what? What do you think is going to happen? You know, how is that making it better? And the answer is not. It's just setting up, you know, the next disaster, which is, you know, and sooner or later, all countries and all empires fail. And you know, that's what's coming. You know, I don't see any way out of this. And again, when again our politicians completely do not understand the science and or choose not to understand the science, it's really disturbing, because there's no way out when when the people you elect, and assuming you elect them honestly, they have no clue what they're talking about. You know, and I mean, politics is a hard job, I admit. You have to know something about to do it well. You have to understand a lot of things, you know, that may be outside your normal area of expertise. But they don't even bother anymore. They just, you know, they gobble this stuff up. CDC or Health Canada says Health Canada, couldn't find their butts with both hands in a flashlight at this stage. I mean, it's unbelievable. And yet then they mimic whatever CDC and FDA say, and they're wrong too, because they don't understand stuff. It's really it's like a collapse of intellectual integrity in much of the world. And then, you know, and again, as an academic, this is really disturbing. I've spent my entire life as an academic, and I'm watching this all dissolve. It's like it wasn't there. You know, we're going back to some dark age where, you know, we believe in mystical stuff. And you know, I've got an ex-wife with her partner now climbing pyramids in Mexico, thinking she's going to become a Toltec shaman. Like, what the hell is that about? Honestly, you know, it's just weird. And the Hadron Collider, I think we shouldn't have started it up because some bug got in there and just got whapped, and we got punched into a parallel universe where nothing makes sense anymore. Because, you know, that's what they do. There was some physicists actually saying that back in the day. Let's not turn this on just yet, okay? And we did, and you know, boom, you know, like here we are, and all of a sudden it's like boom, you know, we're in some other really weird place, or maybe maybe we just did it to ourselves. But it's really hard to rationally understand what's happening. Yeah, which
Okay.
I think is part of the problem. Yeah. Anyway.
There's so many things you've said that I want to ask you about. So you're talking about a lack of sense, a lack of common sense. That's what is
That's
so
common sense.
rare
So it
when
comes down to it.
yeah, when somebody says, "Hey, why do I have to put on the mask and then I can take it off to sit?" When somebody asks those common sense questions, it's become incredibly uncommon.
It is. Well,
Why?
you mentioned the mask, and there was there's a pub I used to go to. You walk in the door, okay, And if you sit on a bar stool, you're the same height, but now you can take your mask off. Honestly, I mean, come on. Well, and everyone's going, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, no, it doesn't. It makes
You
no
know,
sense.
Chris, I had an experience. In Toronto, the main public library has a coffee shop right in the entrance. So literally, the whole front of the library is glass, and you can see on this side of the wall
Mm.
are people drinking coffee, so therefore no masks. And on the other side of the wall are people in a reading room with masks.
Mm.
So you're literally walking by, and like it's absurd, and nobody's seeing it.
Yeah,
So
and they,
yeah,
well, Bonnie Henry has, with her usual ability to mangle facts, has just brought in masking mandates for all public health institutions. Okay, in BC,
okay. So
even though she knows, and she's even admitted, and Patricia Daly, who's the president of Vancouver Coastal Health, knows it doesn't work, and they're doing it again. Like,
so why are they doing it? How are they getting away with it?
because our citizens are mostly lazy. They're too busy watching Netflix. We have people have talked for years about dumbing down of the population,
Yeah.
and it really has happened. We have been dumbed down to the point, whatever you score in an IQ test, it doesn't translate into common sense. However many degrees you have, and I have a lot of academic friends who are very smart people, but
So that's the other
it's like
part.
this goes
Yeah,
right past them.
that's the other part I wanted to ask you about. Okay, so I get that the population in general has been dumbed down, but you're
Well,
an
that's for sure.
academic.
Actually. Yeah.
You're an academic. Academics are apparently trained to think. So
Apparently.
how is it?
How-
How is it that because academics seem to have been almost religiously or vehemently for all the things that no longer make any sense. I mean, it seems they have bought in almost in some ways more than everybody else. What is that about?
You tell me, because I can't figure it out. And it's weird though. I mean, people default in outside their areas of expertise to whatever authority. So maybe it's a human tendency to trust authority. I mean, it was interesting, when you watched how different populations responded to their public health agencies.
Mm.
So in Sweden, the Swedes didn't do the same things we did, and they trust their public health agency, and yet in the United States and Canada, we trust our public health agency. And we do the opposite. So when you compare the two, you think, well, how is that even possible that you're doing totally different things, and everyone in your society is trusting you that you're doing the right thing? Don't you guys? I mean, we're supposed to be, more literate world population. We have access to internet. We can see things happening all over the world, minus the AI part, which is interesting, minus the propaganda, which is, terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we have that access to things, and no one seems to recognize that, or not no one, but very few people. And
Very true.
again, people who are trained to think about stuff, presumably at a high level, presumably looking at nuances, presumably looking at being able to do meta-analyses and sifting data and saying, okay, this doesn't make sense, that makes sense, back and forth. We don't do that anymore. Or maybe we do it in some scientific realms. It hasn't happened a lot in COVID, although there is an exception, and that is the Canadian COVID Care Alliance, which you're familiar with,
Yeah.
which is there playing whack-a-mole with the Bonnie Henrys of the world. And we every time she says something, no matter how dumb it seems on face value, we look at it and say, okay, maybe this time, like a broken clock, she could be right. Let's look at it. And we look at it. No, it was dumb too. But we always analyze everything. And most people don't.
Just go back for a second. For those people who don't know about the Canadian COVID Care Alliance, just a brief summary of what it is and your involvement.
The Canadian COVID Care Alliance is a group of physicians and scientists who have been taking a hard look at all of the COVID issues surrounding, including both the health issues, the pathophysiology of the disease, and of the consequences of the vaccines across all levels, from infants, pregnant women, all the way up to adults and the elderly. We've looked at consequences of the mandates, the consequences of the lockdowns, whether masking works or doesn't, whether vaccines work or don't. Looking at the vaccines in a great deal of detail for the harm they have done, and basically trying to put it into some sort of rational perspective. And so we are independent scientists and doctors. I am the co-chair of the what's called the Scientific and Medical Advisory group of that organization. And now we're thinking of expanding into looking at other things such as the whole Soji phenomena, which you're familiar with, I'm sure, such as and again,
Yeah, I just want to identify for those who don't
yeah,
know what
that's the sexual orientation and gender identity, which has been kind of roiling this country for quite a long time now. Where some people are pushing a fairly radical, and I don't mean radical in a good sense, but an agenda that involves sexualization of children and acceptance of transgender issues, almost blindly without thinking about it. And it's become kind of for a lot of people on what used to be called the left, and I don't think left and right mean anything anymore, but on the left it used to be, what's left of the left, which is sad, is basically, this is somehow a freedom movement, that, to deny pedophiles the ability to go into washrooms and stare under changing stalls and look at little girls. No, that's okay, because they're just expressing their identity. Those are the kind of things we've that a lot of people have been focusing on. So anyway, we need to look at that because we're looking at medical and health issues, and we want to continue.
I just want to say something about what you just said. Yeah. Because a lot of people may think you're exaggerating.
Oh no,
but you're not.
Oh no. There was a thing. It was, I can't remember. It was in our parliament. One of the few opposition members who actually does anything useful got up and read from one of the books that was in one of the elementary. You saw that, okay? And the speaker of the legislature told him to stop because the words were not appropriate in the legislature. He said, "Well, I'm just reading a book for adults," and he said, "I'm just reading from a book that children can get." Seriously? But it's no, you can't read it in the ledge. No, sorry, that's disgusting. And really, okay, well, okay, if it's disgusting in the ledge, maybe you don't want to expose your 8-year-olds to it. Maybe, just maybe. And of course, no, of course not. And you look at a case where the Freedom Convoy was, I think, one of the most glorious events in Canadian history, and yet our NDP government in British Columbia, and I don't say our in a kind of general sense, not mine anyway, they voted 64-1, with only one person dissenting, to condemn the truckers and to support everything that Bonnie Henry had done.
You see, so I am formerly of the left, before the left.
Me too. Before the left, yeah.
Exactly. And for me, it's like, can people not see that the party that's supposed to stand for the working class has aligned themselves with Big Pharma,
yep,
and is demonizing the working class?
Yeah, I mean, the last time I checked, I'm a pointy-headed academic. I get that, and I don't work with my hands. I get that too. But you know what? Truckers, as far as I can tell, are working class people. Pretty sure they are.
Yeah.
And why all of a sudden, so the NDP is cherry picking who's actually a working person. It is the working people that agree with us and the working people who don't. And the ones who don't are fascist, KKK, Confederate flag waving Nazis, or whatever the term of the day is. You think, wait a minute, how did this possibly happen? These are working people. Like,
Again, who walked down the streets in Ottawa with a camera or without could see that there was every color, every culture, everything.
Yeah, and a lot of them are Sikh, which last time I checked are not white nationalists as a general rule. So but it doesn't matter anymore, because people say these words as if they actually mean something, and a lot of the public goes, "Oh yeah, that's right. There were a bunch of white nationalists." Well, wait a minute. There are Sikhs and blacks and Asians there. How is that possible? And it's not, of course. And again, the lack of critical thinking. CBC says this, and it must be true, right? And once upon a time, maybe it was true, but those days have been long gone.
So why is it that? Okay, so we're clear that there is a lack of critical thinking. Mm-hmm. Certainly there's a lack of scientific literacy. And that's something I had to deal with myself, because one of the things that first for me with the COVID narrative, because I had been sick and because I had been healing myself over years, I was following a number of cutting edge health gurus, right? So they weren't really inside the mainstream. Everything I was doing to heal myself was non-allopathic. So I had information, and I
Mhm.
really just thought people need information. But I also had to educate myself to be able to even just understand a study. Like I have no science background.
Mhm.
So I think there's clearly something missing there. But there's
Yeah.
something else. And this is one of the reasons I started this podcast is I wanted to understand, why do some people see and some people are oblivious? It's not the amount of education.
No. Well, yes and no. It's the kind of education,
Okay,
because
say more about
the
that.
education is, well, the education is more, how do students learn in medical school? Okay, they learn stuff by rote.
Yeah.
And you do not succeed in medical school if you challenge any of your professors. That's not the path to success. Now, in graduate school, it can be, but not in medical school. In medical school, you basically learn and shut up and do what you're told. And that's largely what's happened. And so you get a bunch of people come out who have never done any critical analysis of anything, and they don't want to either. They're busy people. I get that. They've got student loans. They can't afford to not work. Okay, I get that too. And but what they park in the corner is their critical sensibilities. They just don't question anything that comes down from higher. And that's really, and when you see, for example, Bill C-36 rolling out, and some of the other legislation that basically is putting bureaucrats in control of the medical profession in British Columbia. Where are the doctors screaming, and saying this is ridiculous? Well, why would a bureaucrat know more than a medical professional? Well, they wouldn't. Well, maybe some medical professionals anyway.
Okay, so first, again, for people outside of BC, outside of Canada, explain Bill 36.
Bill 36 was basically an attempt to consolidate under a series of bureaucratic measures all of the health colleges and health agencies in British Columbia. So the one for physicians and surgeons, the one for chiropractors, the one for whatever health profession, that are now going to be regulated by the government, and they're not going to be independent, self-regulating. They're going to be regulated by David Eby and his crowd. I just want to come back to one thing with the COVID Care Alliance. We're putting out a book, and it's coming out with Skyhorse if we can get it done soon, and we're already late, but if we can get it done, it's going to come out with Skyhorse in sometime in the early in the new year. And it is meant to be kind of a comprehensive look at all things COVID, so that we can not only learn from it, but maybe, just maybe, if enough people read it, or they can use it as doorstops too, because it's very big. But if they don't use it as doorstops, if they actually read it, maybe the next time this crap comes down the pike, they'll say, I've seen that before. Why does this look really familiar? Whether it's RSV or COVID variant, what's the joke on COVID variants? BS,
Yeah,
24/7. Yeah. So BS 24/7, when that comes, or whatever, we're going to say, wait a minute, that looks real familiar. Let's not do that again. No, the next time they tell us to mask up and put, whatever heels on that don't work, let's say, that was kind of a little bit of a false flag there. So let's not do that again. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to happen, because again, reading skills.
I was going to say people would have to read, and there's
You'd have to read, and
a lot of books so far.
Yeah, but if you don't read them, they don't do much good for you, because and then you can get Google to give you a capsule summary, which of course is going to serve their agenda, not yours. So,
which brings me to your Wikipedia page.
I haven't looked at it for a while, but a colleague of mine, I looked at it, before, and he said, I want to rewrite that. It's just what they say is just bullshit, and it was. And he rewrote it, and someone rewrote it again to take it back where it was, and it just goes back. And I haven't even looked at it for years.
Oh my God! Well, here's what I want to tell you. It does not say that you're spreading conspiracy theories. So I need to ask you: are you not trying hard enough?
I guess I do my best, but with COVID, Canadian COVID Care Alliance, but I guess I'm not trying hard enough. I'll try harder. When I come off this broadcast, I'm going to put all the conspiracy theories I can right up there on my Facebook page. It's like
I'll be checking in. Please
do. Yeah. I'll find something about zombies and Martians while I'm up. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. So I don't know. That might be acceptable now. So
no, probably it is. Yeah. I'm told
that. Yes. So the lack of critical thinking, I get, in terms of academics, I get it. There's a lot of just learning to produce the results that are required in order to get the degree, the job, the prestige, whatever.
Yeah.
So two things. One, what about for average Canadians? What is it that you think has some people see and some people don't? Because I have not been able to figure that out. And I'm curious as to what you think.
I think there are a couple of things. I think some people are just contrarian, and I'm probably one of them. One of the things that really has come out a lot. Okay, let me do a little sidebar here. I think a lot of people, we live in increasingly dystopian age, and I think a lot of people are seeking certainty in some sort of way, and that's why they're going into cults. That's why they're blindly following Bonnie Henry. That's why they're rushing off to war without thinking about it. Um, the the tendency to do that, I think, is very strong in humans, and I kind of lost the thread of that. But
Why some people see him once, why
but
some
I think
don't.
the other thing, the one thing that I've noticed, and I'm not a person of particular religious faith. I mean, I was raised Jewish, but I mean, I'm sure, but it's Passover and Hanukkah, kind of my level of religiosity. I have friends who are quite religious in both Christians and Jews and Muslims. Um, it's curiously enough the people who have grounding in religion, whatever that religion may be, and that includes Buddhists and Hindus and everything else under the sun. If you're grounded in faith, something bigger than you, I think you don't feel as lost and as likely to glom onto a Bonnie Henry and or a COVID narrative and or a Hamas versus Israel narrative. You have grounding. I mean, you kind of know who you are and know where you're from, and you're less likely to take these things as literally as parts of the tablet from Mount Sinai, because you know where the real tablets from Mount Sinai and your faith are. And I think a lot of people who are rootless, and a lot of people are rootless, they don't know what to believe, and so they seek anything. They're just grasping at straws all over the place. Whatever new thing comes along, they'll just grasp at that because they don't have anything. And it was interesting because I don't know if you ever heard of a book called The Rush Hour of the Gods, and I believe it was Bruno Bettelheim. He was an author, American, I believe, and he wrote this book about what happened in Japan after they lost the war. And Japan, because of its culture and its ties to the emperor and to Shinto religion and the isolation of the Japanese islands, really thought they could not ever lose. There was a cultural belief, and when they did, it was such a shock to so many people. Like how can the unimaginable have happened? So there was, and that's what Bettelheim called it, the rush hour of the gods, the cults and the religions, the thing that sprang up all over Japan, trying to let's make sense of this. It doesn't make any sense. What's happening? Let's grab something to make ourselves understand how the world is flipped upside down. And I think we're going through that. I think we're going through the equivalent of what the Japanese went through in 1945. The world makes no sense anymore, and we will seek anything that helps us, at least something to hold on to. And maybe that's what's going on.
That's really interesting. Does that understanding of human nature, that understanding of being grounded in something, grounded in faith, grounded in principles, is that part of what led you to creating the Freedom Pledge?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
The Freedom Pledge, and the Freedom Pledge also comes from kind of the history of various resistance movements. Okay, and basically said, look, there's some things we're not going to tolerate. We're not doing it. Okay, just no matter what. And there have been many examples throughout history. You can go back to Spartacus or beyond Spartacus if you want to, and forward. You look at the resistance movements in Nazi-occupied Europe. You look at the different groups, and even look at the Palestinians, or look at the Jews throughout history. They've always struggled to reclaim what they thought was theirs, and even in the face of horrible oppression, horrible acts committed against them. And which is one of the odd things about the Palestinians is really they're awfully alike in a lot of ways. So the fact that they are so desperately trying to kill each other is really disturbing when you know people from both cultures. You realize that they have a lot of similarities, probably more similarities than opposite. So there are acts of resistance. Resistance doesn't have to be just You don't have to pick up a gun to resist. You can simply say no. You can say, the resistance can be a little old lady singing a song, or mooning Justin Trudeau as he drives by. These are all acts of resistance. And I think that's what the pledge is, basically saying, no more. This is as far as the bastards go, no further. And that's, I think, what we all have to do. We all have to decide whatever level to take that pledge and say, that's enough, just enough. Basta, stop it.
So I wanna read the pledge, but I want to ask you before I do, what was your line? What was your I'm not going to take it anymore?
Well, a lot of things, but again, it was the aporia, it was the ridiculous things that were coming out, and people were going, "Oh yeah, I'm going to mask up and I'll walk into the bar and then I'll take it off." Things like that. It was like, okay, just enough. It's just it's not just oppressive. It's stupid, And at some point, I really have a problem with stupid. And again, maybe it's because I'm an academic, but it was kind of like that. I think, okay, this makes no sense. I'm not doing something that makes no sense. And again, it comes down to common sense. These things are stupid. They don't make any sense. And just no, just not doing it anymore. And I think if we all did that, everywhere, the outcomes would be, well, I mean, look, governments have to pretend they represent, at least democratic governments, ours is not, but let's pretend they have to pretend they respect the will of the people, because officially they're our servants and we're the masters. Well, that's not true, but let's pretend it is for a moment. Then in principle, they should listen to us if we say we're not doing it. And maybe they do if there's enough people, or they just carry on and come up with more stuff. And then you're pushed into a different box, because then you're pushed into a situation where if you're resisting peacefully, John F. Kennedy said this very well, long before they shot his head off. They said, not that long actually. They said, if you make peaceful revolution impossible, you make violent revolution inevitable. And I think we're going to find that out, because if you keep pushing people, up in the valley where I live, you come for the children. Yeah, no, it's not going to happen up here. Some people may go along, but you start mandating these things, you start pushing it into kids, you start threatening people's families. That's when people have weapons up here, and you start pushing people hard enough. Then you get a violent resistance, and only an insane person would want that. But when you push people hard enough, that's where violent revolutions come from. Is governments overreach. They assume authority they don't have, or sometimes they don't have any authority, but they just take it, and then you get a pushback, and that's where you get these revolutions occurring, right? Whichever country it is. I was in Nicaragua back in the 80s, and they had the revolution against the Somoza regime, and Nicaraguans had taken it for a long time, until the poop got up to here. And then when it got to there, then they went out in the streets and took on the army. And that's what happens. And if you don't want to get to that point, which I think we're coming to, I think when the Trudeaus, or who knows what Polyev will do, when the Trudeaus keep pushing, they're going to create a circumstance they claim they don't want. Maybe they do want it, but that's people can only take so much before. And again, when you threaten children, then the gloves come off. They have to.
Okay, I'm going to read the pledge.
Please.
Before my Creator, my family, and my community, I declare I will rise up, speak up, and disobey harmful and tyrannical orders, whether they come from a domestic or foreign entity. I will stand in my power and authority and reclaim my innate rights and what has been unlawfully and immorally taken from me, my family, and my community. I will resist any attempt by government or otherwise to divide people or communities from each other, or to subjugate any people to discrimination or harassment based on ethnicity, faith, bodily autonomy, or freedom of choice. If the enemies of freedom come for anyone's children, my neighbors, my community, or my nation, I will resist. I will not surrender my rights, nor those of my children and community.
That's better than I thought it was.
It's why I wanted to interview you, because
that's good. I should mention, by the way, that Ted Kuntz had a lot to do with that. He did some really good edits on that. So he's really as you know him, he's great for putting a lot of things into perspective. I probably rambled on for another 10 pages. maybe nice and
Well, you're an
tight.
academic, right? So
Yeah, that's true. I do tend to ramble, as your audience now knows after the last half an hour.
So this pledge, you said
Yeah.
that there were a number of things that inspired you. Can you talk more about the things that inspired you to do it, what you want to see happen with it?
I want to empower people to realize they are not helpless. They don't have to go along just because some government wanker says so. They don't have to. They have to use their common sense. They have to be grounded in faith of whatever kind, uh, family and community, and ultimately that's what really counts. And if they are, and they take this pledge, they will recognize that it's not just, again, that's what faith gives people. It gives them a sense of community, a sense of belonging to something that's bigger than self. A lot of us have become so isolated in our lives, and again, we see it with the trans stuff and all that kind of stuff. People are so isolated and so lacking community that they fall for governments that do overreach. And I think that was part of the thing is let's create something, and people can choose to accept it or not. But what are you going to do if they come for your kids? What are you going to do? And I decided, it was about a year ago, whenever whenever the Emergencies Act was. And, some of my friends and I up here said, look, this is getting pretty serious here. They brought in Emergencies Measures Act, and they could do anything under that, and they gave themselves the power to do absolutely anything. And what if they do? What if they start to come from my neighbors who won't get vaccinated? What if they start to come from people who disagree? What if they start rounding up the children to take them off to force vaccinate? And it's no, not for anybody's kids. I'm not going to let it. I'm not going to let it happen. If it cost me my life, it cost me my life. I've been around for a while. I had a good life. Okay, but that's it. No, I'm not going to do that. And I wanted that to serve as a way for people to basically define their red line. What is my red line? What will I not tolerate? And we back up all the time, sure, but okay, this is it. This is as far as it goes. It doesn't go any further. And at the same time, I'll share it with you if you want to. I did a kind of a modern day draft of Common Sense. And Common Sense was written by Thomas Paine, an American British. He was actually born in Britain. He moved to the United States before it was the United States. And he wrote this amazing document that he called Common Sense. Basically said, look, we don't actually have to be citizens of Britain. We've created something new here. We don't actually have to obey the king. And he demolished the monarchy, with his words, and he demolished the whole notion of hereditary monarchies and the rule of one people over another. And I thought it was really important for us to begin to go back to the roots of at least the American Republic, which got rapidly forgotten, by the way. But leaving that aside, Thomas Paine actually laid out basically the right of people to choose their own government and to decide how they want to be ruled. And I think we need to do that again here. I think we have a very dysfunctional government. I don't think it's any way democratic. Yes, we call it democratic, but the Chinese do too. So well, actually, they're a little more honest than we are, because they don't have the same hypocrisy that we do, pretending that we have a perfect democratic union. And I wanted to basically take the parts from Thomas Paine and do it in the modern day and say, what are the things that simply need to change, and we will change these things. And that was kind of the motivation for that. And I'll be happy to send that to you if you'd like to see it.
Yes, please.
We had it published in a local paper up here. Oh, we're up in the Cowichan Valley. Let me tell you, there's the politicians up here. They're doing everything they can to make sure that no alternative voices are heard. They are. It's pretty extraordinary. You should talk to one of my colleagues named Adriana Richards, who has been trying. She ran for council, as did I, and she's been trying to raise things in the council chambers. And she gets shut down all the time. They don't want to hear it, and they're moving. Some of the people on council, a few of them, who are actually sympathetic, basically been kicked off committees, so they can't actually object to things. Watching this unfold here is really remarkable. Just the way that politicians, some of the politicians, basically assume they've been elected by Klaus Schwab. I don't know, because they're not listening to their constituents anymore. That's for sure. and they just do stuff like there's a whole thing. And again, I won't go into it now, but there's a whole big thing about changing the estuary on Cowichan Bay, which had no consultation at all. We didn't talk to the farmers, didn't really talk to the First Nations, didn't talk to the people who live in the area. No, we're just going to do this. We're just going to move the dikes around. Oh, really? Okay. When did you get the right to do that? So that was the basis of common sense. Common sense really says, look, we have a right to choose how we're governed, and we have a right to remove politicians who forget that small detail. And this is this is what we've experienced in the last 3.5 years, almost 4 years now. And that's enough. Again, that comes back to the pledge. That's as far as these bastards go. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of related. And I'll be happy to send you the document later if you want to see it.
Yeah, that'd be great. So when you found that, I love what you said, that, it gives us an opportunity for each of us to define what we will not tolerate. Because it's like, because we've become lazy, because we've never had to fight for anything, really, certainly in this country, within living generations, that it's like the authoritarian bodies just keep kind of pushing and pushing and pushing. Boiling the frog slowly, so the people don't know. What is my question? My question is, so again, I keep coming back to, here you are, somebody who you trying to run for city council or town council, and you're clearly involved politically. You wrote a pledge, you stood up for around your own job. And I want you to talk about that a little bit, just to give people a sense. So you chose to stand by your principles versus saving your prestige, your income, all the things that other people did. So maybe you could just first talk a little bit about what happened with you, and then what it is that had you draw that line and stand up for what you believed.
Well, what happened in the summer of 2021, the Bonnie Henry, again, our favorite public health officer, decided that in all health institutions, people had to be vaccinated to be in there. Whether you're, especially any staff, and she promulgated it down to the local health regions, and a woman named Patricia Daly, who is the president of Vancouver Coastal Health, expanded on that and basically said, okay, anyone who walks into any of the university hospital buildings, and my laboratory was down near the Vancouver General Hospital, anyone who even goes in there, and any staff, any students, any workers, you're laying drywall, you're changing windows, you still got to be double vaccinated, or in whatever number of vaccines at the time. There was 2 then, going on 3, and otherwise you're fired. Okay, and my chair at the time basically let everybody in the department know. I said, okay, listen, this is a new regulation. You all got to do it. Let me know your vaccine status. And I said, no, I'm not telling you. That's private medical information. You can no, thank you. And that was kind of my line in the sand at the time. And then he came back and said, well, you kind of got to, otherwise I have to put you on suspension, and suspension is followed by termination. Okay. I explained why.
At this point, you are a full professor for 35 years.
Yeah. Well, at that time, 33 years anyway. So I've got grants, and I'm looking at this kind of trivial problem of how to early detection for Lou Gehrig's disease. Of course, no one cares about that. So I'm working on that, and then in December, basically says, okay, since you won't take the vaccines, you won't tell me that your status. So that means you haven't taken the vaccines. You won't take the vaccines. I'll give you extra week, and you go get it done, and then we'll just forget this ever happened. And I said, oh, I'm not doing it. I sent a very, very long letter to him. And I said, look, here's why. I am the co-chair of the Canada COVID Care Alliance. And, these vaccines are not safe. I do not want to get, I've had the disease. I sent included in my report the fact that I had actually had the disease, which meant that I had natural immunity. And apparently he'd never heard of natural immunity. And so that's not good enough. Sorry, can't do it. There's only one way to get out of this. Go take the vaccines. Tell me when you're going to do it. So I'm not doing it. And then a week later, I got put on unpaid suspension. Okay. So basically, what followed from that is, I wasn't getting a salary. Okay, well, I have other sources of income, and was draining it pretty good. But anyway, he also managed, my laboratory basically functionally had to close because I couldn't do anything on unpaid suspension. I couldn't write grants. I couldn't supervise my lab. Two of my staff were basically we ran out of money. Then they took the money that was in my grants and they basically gave it to another investigator. Now, it was supposed to be to continue to run the lab, but that's not what happened. They used it for other purposes, which is an incredible violation of research ethics. And of course, we now have the provost office involved because the provost says, "You can't do that. If you don't want it, if Shaw's an asshole, which maybe he is, then give it back to the donor." Well, no, they didn't do that either. So it's okay. So that became a big issue. Fortunately, this last May, a new chair came in. And a little more rational, and a lot more rational actually, and basically said, "Well, this is nonsense. Let's get you back to work, and we'll solve it, which my first chair could have done by simply moving my laboratory up to campus." And that's what she's done. So my laboratory will now move to campus. They still haven't found the missing money. That's a little bit of an issue, but so I get to move to campus to an empty room. Okay, that's great. So research, in case your audience doesn't know, actually depends on some money to make to buy the chemicals and et cetera. So anyway, that doesn't exist anymore. They're working on that. So anyway, so I'm reinstated. So at least I'm getting a salary. But and a lot of people that happened to. It happened to Byron Bridle. It happened to who he is. It happened to a guy named David Spiker. I think he's in Guelph. A lot of universities came through this really oppressive policy. And in my case at UBC, I said, listen, I can't walk into my laboratory. I still can't actually, by the way, my old laboratory. So okay, so if that's the case, I'll listen. I'm a member of the university community. I'll do more teaching. That's fine. I can do that. So no, you can't teach. Okay. Oh well, I can do more admin stuff. No, absolutely not. You take the shots, or that's it. And that was kind of where it got left. And so
Okay.
talk about lack of logical thinking.
I mean, what is a supposedly deadly disease have to do with administration? You're not.
Well, yeah. What does it have to do with administration? What does it have to do with the building I was in, which doesn't see patients? And I'm not a
Right.
medical doctor. I'm a researcher in a research building that sees nobody except other scientific colleagues. So where are we threatening the public exactly? And you're not. And it came right after Patricia Daly, if you recall that little leaked video clip where she says, "Well, we know it doesn't really prevent infection. We don't doesn't really change the outcomes. If people walk around without masks, without vaccines, it doesn't really matter." Really? Okay. Well, then how come we're doing it? Well, because we can, because we're going to, because just because.
Because they want to push people to do
Yeah.
it.
And basically, Daly said that. She said we were trying to incentivize people to get the vaccines.
Okay.
Now, what we know about the vaccines, all those incentivized people who have taken 2 or 3 or who knows how much are chronically ill now, and they're going to be. And my concern, I think I said this at the NCI, my concern is a lot of them are going to have neurological consequences because the spike protein and the mRNA go everywhere in your body. They focus on a few areas, but they do get into brain. When you get a spike protein, which is very, very hard to normally to degrade because it's built so it can't degrade. When you get it into your brain, it's going to infect cells. When it infects cells, those cells are going to die. Your immune system is going to attack them and destroy them. Now what? Well, this is your brain. This is not your foot, where your skin cells grow back. This is your brain where brain cells don't grow back. Now what? So we now potentially have a lot of chronically ill people who are going to have neurological consequences. We know that a lot of people have cardiac consequences, myocarditis. Almost everybody who, certainly in certain age groups, that took the vaccines has a heart condition. And that's going to have enormous impacts for longevity. It's going to have for chronic disease. And those are just some of the things we know. Autoimmunity, I expect, is going to go way up, and it already is. Neurological diseases, a lot of the long COVID stuff, which and there's long COVID that also is associated with the vaccines. That stuff is going to go up. You're going to see a lot of chronically ill people. So when someone like Bonnie Henry says, "Oh, we vaccinated 98% of the surgeons in BC," well, that tells me that 98% of the surgeons may not be working in the future. When you vaccinated 98% of the police officers, same thing, airline pilots, ferry workers, all that kind of stuff. And hence you now begin to see all the things where the ferries aren't going a lot of the time because they can't find the staff. Some of the staff just don't want to. Some of the staff are sick. Some of the staff didn't get vaccinated. All those things. Same with healthcare workers. Same with the military. Same with the police. We are looking at the collapse of a lot of segments of society because a lot of people are just not there for whatever reason, and a lot of it's going to be chronic illness. So,
This was,
that concerns me.
I,
That's besides Hamas and Israel, that's what keeps me up at night. Thinking what is going to happen when all those things aren't there anymore? What do you do now? And that's one of the reasons I moved up here. I moved up here to this valley because there are more people who think like I do up here, and they grow food here, so it's not doesn't come from the supermarket. Yeah, sure, you can buy it in the supermarket, but there's other places to get food here. A lot of people have. I have a big garden outside. People down the street have chickens and all kinds of stuff. You know, and people are more resistant for a variety of reasons to this kind of stuff. So here, my family can survive. I'm not sure I would try this in Victoria. I wouldn't, sure as hell wouldn't try it in Vancouver. God help me in Toronto.
yeah.
I wouldn't live in Toronto anyway. Sorry, Torontonians, but
No, I am a recovering Torontonian.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Good part about the recovery, though. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I used to be so proud.
No, I know. One of my ex-wives was too. Yeah.
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 So it was your testimony, actually, when you talked about a societal disaster of terrifying proportion.
Yep.
It was one of the scariest pieces of testimony I heard. And I heard all the testimony, all 300 plus witnesses, all 200 plus hours. And that testimony, I really got that we need to face this potential. Now, you talk about, what keeps you up at night. You talk about what terrifies you. And yet you're willing to push into that fear.
Mm.
So you're facing that fear. You're looking at it going, this could happen. I'm going to do something about it on many different levels with the CCCA, with your own family, with city council, like town council. You're doing something. Most people seem to be being manipulated by fear. So they are succumbing to that fear. They are not in action. In fact, it's that fear that's keeping them buried, having their heads buried in the sand.
Yeah.
How do we overcome that? What is it that we can do so that people will be willing to face the fear and do what needs to be done?
I have children. I have little children. I have big ones, but I have little ones. And when I had children, I took on an obligation to them to do the right thing in everything. I don't always succeed, but things that I thought were wrong, I did not want to have them have to deal with when they grew up. And Thomas Paine, again, he's one of my heroes. Thomas Paine once said, "If there must be trouble, let it be in my day, so my children will know peace." And I believe that. So I am not going to push on to my children something that I could have dealt with. Okay. And I have to deal with it because that is the obligation of fatherhood for me. That is my line in the sand. I will protect my children at all costs, whatever it takes, whether it's money or blood or whatever. I will protect my children. And so I saw no choice here. It was not like I'm just a great guy. It says I felt this obligation to my children that I could not abandon. I couldn't morally abandon. I had to be able to look them in the face someday when they say, "Daddy, what did you do during COVID?" or "What did you do during whatever?" And I said, "Well, I did my best. I tried to fight against things that I thought were wrong." And that's the best legacy I can leave my children. It's not money. It's that someday when they're bigger and they have kids of their own, they're going to say, "Daddy, he was a bit of a jerk in some ways, but he was determined to protect us, and he did." And that's what I want to leave with my children. And I think anyone who has children, if you believe the COVID vaccines and the mandates are the best thing for them, well, then you do. But if you don't, then you have to oppose them because you have an obligation to another generation. And I don't want to appropriate First Nations teachings, but again, we have I think we do have obligation to 7 generations to make this place better, and not allow it to slide into dystopia. And if we don't do that, then I don't think we can call ourselves moral people. Maybe that's too harsh, but I think moral people have to act on what they believe is right. And if they don't, well, then then don't call yourself a moral person. That's all. You know.
Well, this is in fact the other part of why I started this podcast. So it's called Trued Up, because I could see people like you who are out there doing what is true to their values, to their morals, to their principles, and other people who aren't. And I don't know what it is that has people so removed from their own, at least declared values.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't raised in a religious home, but my dad was an extremely moral man, and he took it from his Jewish tradition. And the concept of justice. There was a I can't remember. I think it was might have been Hillel. I can't remember which rabbi it was, but a long time ago, he said, "Justice, justice, thou shalt pursue, always." And if you don't, well, then don't call yourself a moral person. You must pursue justice, and justice means for everybody. It certainly means for your children. And it certainly means to stand up against things you think are wrong. Because otherwise, again, then say, okay, I don't care anymore. I'm not going to be moral. I'm going to watch Netflix and smoke dope and go to festivals, and who cares? Okay, well, you can do that, but that's not me. And it's not most of the people I know. At least a lot of the people I know.
For those people who, you said that some people they've gotten vaccinated, they've gotten their kids vaccinated, they thought that was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
How do we? I think one of the hardest things is, given a parent's natural, innate desire to protect, if they've done that, how do we get them to face, or how do they themselves, I should say, because it's not up to us to get people to do something, but how do people face that? How do they find, what did they find? How do they find it to be able to go, oh, yeah, that was not good, or I was wrong?
Well, I think people are coming to that. I think a lot of people have seen vaccine injuries, COVID vaccine injuries, through people in the family, people they know. God, forbid it's their children. And I think they're beginning, little by little. There was a great book that came out some years ago called Into the Buzzsaw, and it was talking about journalists who had tried to report things that the editors and the corporations that control the mainstream media, including in Canada, didn't want them to know. And they thought they were doing, their honest journalistic job, and they just wham, and oh, that didn't work like that. I think a lot of parents have hit that wall too, and a lot of people are beginning to see, if they themselves are injured or someone else is injured, that they were misled. They were taken for this amazing ride, and damaged in the process. And so you remember the Matthias Desmet stuff on mass psychosis formation, and basically, when people talk to him now, he says, well, what should we do? I mean, a lot of this stuff is done. People, the governments are ignoring us. And he says, keep talking, just keep talking to people. You always engage, because the fraction of the population, some 20% are the true believers. They drink all the Kool-Aid you give them. They're never coming off the ledge. They're just going to do that. You got about 20% on the other side that basically says, "Screw it, no, it's my body's my choice." Curiously enough, that phrase apparently only applies to women under certain circumstances. Doesn't apply to anybody else. Okay, I had that Facebook dust up with somebody. Said, "No, you can't use that phrase." Oh, really? Okay, sure.
I know.
Anyway, so like 20% said, "No, just not," and then a whole bunch in the middle, kind of get along to go along, and they are the ones that are going to be the movable portion of that fraction. The 20% who drank the Kool-Aid, they're going to go back for their 97th booster, assuming they live that long, and be glad. I mean, it's people, and I was just in Victoria, people are still walking around with masks on. Good Lord.
How do you deal
in
with
cars by themselves?
I know.
Yeah, but that's why I'm drinking tea on the show, to keep COVID off of me. Anyway.
But how do you deal with that? I mean, first of all, you're a scientist, so you must be like, your head must be imploding with all the reasons why it's wrong. But are you able to engage with people, or do
yes,
you?
Yes.
Yes.
And okay, so he said, you always engage, even if you don't think it's going to be received, because it is. It's like when you have little kids. I have little kids. You tell them something 1,000 times, nothing is going in. They're just flush the toilet. Come on, and eventually the light bulb goes on. Oh yeah, I got to flush the toilet. Okay. It does set up that thing in their heads that they say, oh, Not everybody agrees with that. Not everybody thinks Bonnie Henry's right. Well, that's curious. And maybe they don't do anything the first time, but the second time or the third time, you keep doing it. You keep trying to engage with your fellow human beings, and that's the only way you get out of this. You engage with your fellow human beings and try and sugarcoat the message in a way that, or not, I wouldn't say sugarcoat, it's the wrong term, but give it to them in a way based on where they are. Okay. Where,
Yes.
where they are in their knowledge, and kind of help them begin, if you can. And a lot of people still don't want to hear it, but a lot of people are now beginning to be receptive because they've seen this. And, but every time they're told to get another booster, they think, well, this is stupid. I did the two. I did the lockdowns. I wore the mask. What? No, again, really? And we're seeing that with the booster uptake. It's very low. And that's good because some people are beginning to think, maybe we weren't told the entire truth. And they're beginning to see the injuries and beginning, the things that are, that are happening. And I think that's what you do. You just keep engaging. You don't abandon people because they made poor choices because they were afraid or ignorant or both, because they, wanted to believe authority. You keep engaging. And that's finally how you begin to turn, if you do, that's how you begin to turn things around. Or more people begin to realize that maybe the government's not our friend. Maybe they're not, all that in a bag of fries too. Maybe they have another agenda, which they do. Maybe it's not our agenda. Maybe it's somebody who lives in Switzerland's agenda, or wherever, wherever it may be. Who could that be? Well, the guy who looks like a James Bond villain. Yeah,
Villain.
I don't know. They took him right out of central casting. How would you find?
Seriously, you know why people don't believe it? It's too on the nose.
It is. It's like I can't be a real person. World Economic Forum. No. Of course, the billionaires fly into Davos on their private jets, but they just want the best for us. Of course, they do. Always. We know that. Bill Gates. He just loves us. Yeah, of course. But I think that's the only way out.
What did he do about 20-to-1 return on his vaccine purchase?
Oh yeah, I wish I'd been invested with him back in the day. But if you don't do that, then again, that's the peaceful form of revolution. If you don't do it that way, then you're going to pick up a weapon. No, nobody wants that, and at least I don't want that. I've been in two armies in my life. I don't want to shoot anybody. I honestly don't. But they threaten my children. That's something I'll die for, and that is my ultimate red light. That's not going to happen. So and again, the better way is just engage. Don't be. Okay. It used to be on the left. Okay, so left is really involved in cancel culture now, which is bizarre. Because back in the day when I was a leftist, whatever that means anymore, whatever that meant even then,
yes.
back in that day, the left engaged, always discussed, always engaged, never was afraid of debate, never was afraid of taking on their opponents verbally and academically in whatever form. And now, of course, you can't, certain things you just can't say. We just had an event canceled at the Cowichan Community Center that was going. I don't know if you ever heard of a woman named Megan Murphy. She speaks about gender ideology and feminism and things like that. And she, one of the things she says, which I completely agree with, is that a lot of the transgender ideology is profoundly misogynist. Okay, it's actually pretty anti-gay too, for that matter.
Yeah.
If you think about it. And so we had organized an event at the Cowichan Community Center where she was going to speak with a panel of people, and it was going to be, and it was called, I think the title was Inclusivity, Gender Identity, and Feminism, something like a fairly innocuous title, and they canceled on us, okay, the day before. And they cited human rights legislation, saying, oh, you guys are promoting gays. No, we're not. We're not promoting anything of the sort. We are simply having a civil discussion about something that is, in that our communities are involved in. And let's have a discussion about it and talk about what, let's discuss. No, can't do that. You can't even discuss it. You get shut down. And we did get shut down. So there's now a legal case. So, the left used to be open to discussion, welcome discussion. And then somehow adopted cancel culture, no matter what it's for. You cannot talk about certain things. It's only this way. It can only be this way. And anyone who says anything the opposite is engaged in hate. You obviously, because you disagree about socioeducation in schools, you must hate all trans people. No, No one said that. No one says that at all. But no, you must do, because what you're saying offends me, and it's hateful. So when did having a different opinion become hateful? Well,
Right.
and that's the left, I got to tell you. And that's for me, as I don't know if you know the term red diaper baby.
No.
Oh, red diaper baby is someone who's raised in a leftist radical household. I was. My
Oh,
parents
I know
were
too.
quite radical. Okay,
Yeah.
and that's how I grew up. I was on picket lines when I was 2.
I do too.
So like
And
so like,
mom
when
is
people want to compare lefty credentials, man, like whip it up, buddy, because mine's bigger than yours and go way back. Were you in Nicaragua? I was. Were you in Syria? No, I was, etc. At Standing Rock, I was there. Come on, who's the bigger lefty? Anyway, but it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter anymore. It's all about whether you subscribe to a particular rigid dogma, and you cannot deviate. It's like a cult. It's become a cult, and that's tragic, actually, because the left did bring us unions, did bring us a 5-day working week. They did bring us holidays, all those kinds of things. And they did champion civil rights. Those are the things that the left back in the day, when there was a left, actually did.
yeah.
And it's gone. It's just gone. It's now cancel culture, cancel culture, cancel culture. And, various academics, one of the guy at SFU, I won't mention his name because he probably get attacked or something. But basically he's been saying, you do this enough, you got to be aware this is a slippery slope. Someone's going to do it to you someday. And, you just, this is not a good way to go. You're just going to, you're bringing it back on your heads. Maybe not
First
tomorrow.
they came for the socialists.
Yeah. And then, all this, again, the ability of people just to dominate and do whatever they want because they can cancel people. Here, come here, you. I'll show you one of the reasons. Here's my red line. Here, buddy, I need you. Come here. I'll show you something. Come here. Come here. Oh, come here.
I see you garner a lot of respect in your household.
I guess it's not working. Lucy, I need to borrow you for a minute. My 3-year-old. Come here. See, it doesn't work. Anyway. Anyway, I was going to show you my 3-year-old because he's the big reason I do a lot of stuff I do, just to preserve my children. And so, yeah. Anyway, I got lost track of that because of the 3-year-old.
That's okay.
He has a very independent mind. Yes, you tell him all you want, and he doesn't pretty much. No, I'm not going to do that. and if you raise children, it's like you wake up in the morning and say, "When did you go to law school? Why, you're getting case law. I can have this candy because last week you let me have. What?
Yeah, be careful what you say.
Yeah, no kidding.
I want to just go back to what you said. First of all, you're talking about always engaging, like not giving up on engaging with people, which I think is so important because, one of the things that the government has done that works is to divide and conquer. Obviously, we know that, but what you're pointing to is not giving up on the victims, right?
No,
Because I
totally.
have a friend who used to say that conversations go to work on people. So like you said, flush the toilet, flush the toilet, flush the toilet. At some point, you flush the toilet. I know you have to go, but I just want to. Yeah,
Here, my 3-year-old has finally decided to show up. Okay.
Yay!
Come here, you. Come here. Come here. Come here. Ah, that's him. Ah, this is Lucian, who is a monster.
Hello. Hi. Were you being shy?
He was being shy.
Ah.
Although usually he just, whatever I'm doing, and I'm trying to write something. That's okay. Yeah. So
The conversations go to work on people, so we need.
I think look. Look. There are fellow human beings. They made a mistake. Made a lot of mistakes. Some of the mistakes were they allowed us to be victimized and made into second-class citizens.
Yeah.
They tolerated that because, again, their general lack of history, general lack of knowledge, blind belief in authority. Nevertheless, they didn't stop being our fellow human beings. And if we, guys, can you take that a little further away, please? When that happens, we become them, and his grandmother made him a really cool Halloween costume. So he was not a panther, not a cougar. I can't remember what. Some sort of feral animal.
Tiger, lion. Cat.
So, if we don't engage with our fellow human, look, here's what happens when you don't engage with your fellow human beings. You get a war like Hamas versus Israel, where both sides think the other is unspeakably evil, and the only solution is to kill them, or wherever conflict you want, where people default into their tribal narrative. If we start doing that with our fellow citizens, then we're done as a country. We're done as a community. You can't have a civil society that way. If we're all going to go in our own little tribes, well, okay, then we're going back 5,000 years in history. Be the angel of your better nature, not the worse. Don't be the devil of your worst nature. Be what you wanted them to be, that they weren't. Set an example. Remember, the justice, thou shalt pursue justice. Don't do to them what they did unto you. And that's all. Okay. That's the lesson of every religion. Don't do unto others what you yourself find hateful. So how could we ban people? And people are terrified. Oh, they're going to shed on us. They're going to do that. No, don't worry about it. Honestly, we have natural immunity. All of us do now. It's again, don't become them. It's a simple line, and help them, make them better people. But you don't make them better people by becoming what they are. You become better people by teaching them and making them more humane, not less so.
How can we use the Freedom Pledge to not become them? Or what's next for the Freedom Pledge?
Because I think we cannot become them, because we can, by taking the pledge, you can recognize that there are things, you recognize your red line. And if you have a very clear sense of self and your individual morality and community and family, then I think you're less likely to become like they were. You're less likely to begin to see other people as lesser, as non-human. And I think that's the first step. Say, I will not do these things. I won't let it happen to me, my family, my community, but I won't let it happen to anyone's family or community. And I'm not going to treat others that way. I'm just not going to. And again, because humanity has to extend to everybody, and the Israelis and Palestinians and Russians and Ukrainians or whoever else needs to learn this. You have to extend your humanity and your compassion and your love and your hopes to everyone. Freedom only works if it's for everyone. You can't say, "Oh, you get freedom and you don't." That's no way to build a world. And there was a really good poet, a good writer named Sean Joyce. He lives in the Kootenays, and he wrote a really good essay for our book that's coming out, the Canadian Cove and Care Alliance, called "Ends and Means," Means and Ends. Sorry, and basically says the world you want to create, it really depends on how you do it. You cannot use evil means to get good ends. You just can't. You're going to get the same crap again sooner or later. So the means have to mirror what the ends you want are. And if you treat other people like crap, like they treat you like crap, you're not going to get a better world out of it. You're just going to play the cycle again. And they treated us like crap. We treated them like crap. The next iteration, they're going to treat you like crap, et cetera. This goes, like Israel and Palestine, come on, it goes on. That war is 100 years old. Think that somebody there, some of the adults in the room would have said, this is just not working out. And that's what we need to do, because it's not just Israel and Palestine, it's global now. And if we don't start treating each other that way, then I think we're done as a species. And then we'll all be living in our little caves and tribal communities where we're desperately trying to survive. And as our ancestors did 10,000 years ago. Well, that's not a great way to go. And one would hope that after all this time, we learned something better. And all the religions of the world have taught us something better.
Well, in the beginning was the Word. So maybe this will be the beginning of a declaration for people. I know when I first heard it, I was moved. I was moved to tears. I really felt the power of declaration in it. And I thank you so much for creating it. I thank you for standing up, for being one of the relatively few scientists, doctors who said, no, this is not right. This does not make sense. This is unscientific. It's immoral. It's just wrong. And I'm so grateful for everything you've done, and thank you for the Freedom Pledge. And let's hope that I will be sharing it. I have shared it, but let's get more people signing it and
Please,
declaring it.
thank you very much for all this, Michelle, and thanks for allowing me to be on your show today. And I will send you the common sense version if you want to distribute it. There's no, I don't, send it to everyone you want who wants to see it or doesn't even want to see it. They don't have to read it. They can always just use it as fire paper. But yeah, I'd like more people to begin to recognize what's happened and pledge themselves, as per the pledge. We're not going to let it happen to anybody ever again, ever. So that's the way forward, I think.
Thanks for helping us to chew ourselves up, Chris.
Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate it.
I read Dr. Chris Shaw's new common sense document that he spoke of after our interview, and it is as sobering, compelling, and hopeful as he is, and you'll find it in the show notes. In it, he again quotes Thomas Paine, "We have it in our power to begin the world over again." Chris and his co-authors write, "Modern human beings have reached an historical crossroads at which two paths diverge, each path leading to very different futures for humanity. The time to make that choice is now before us." We are at a place where we need to put aside our differences and be the adults in the room, as Chris says. We need to develop the ability to look at the other side, a practice that has been disintegrating over decades of divisive tactics practiced by governments and those behind them. But this is also the opportunity of our age, of all ages. As Chris said, we have to be grounded in something bigger than ourselves. Who will we have to be? Who will we become as individuals, as communities, as human beings? He writes, "In Paine's day, the New World was an asylum for persecuted lovers of civil and religious liberty. Today, there is no new world to escape to. Our battle must be here and now." My second takeaway from Chris Shaw is to define your red line. No one has to go along. We are not helpless. And my most humbling takeaway was to always engage with people and keep trying. It's much easier to just avoid uncomfortable conversations, but if we keep trying with the kind of humanity of which Chris speaks, we will break through. And as he says, there are fellow human beings, and freedom only works if it's for everyone. Part of Chris's wisdom, I believe, is his ability to look at and recognize destruction while focusing on creation. We need to begin the world over again, to forge new paths, to look newly, to act newly. Every week I talk about one of the ways we can do this by shopping for a better world. We can stop using our money to feed mega companies selling us unhealthy products and putting small North American companies out of business. The simple step of moving our household spending to non-toxic household products you can buy online is one small way to stop funding our destruction. If you're interested in finding out more, if you'd like to help grow this podcast, contact me about the Switch Away initiative. Just send me an email through gatheryourwits.com to find out more, because I cannot do this without you. We cannot do any of this without each other. I invite you to take the Freedom Pledge or write one of your own and make your declaration known to your family, friends, and community. Trued Up is my pledge to engage people in an inquiry into what it means to be a human being standing up for truth, freedom, and justice. To do so with curiosity, compassion, and a commitment to helping all of us align with what matters. I'd like to hear your key takeaways from my conversation with Chris Shaw. Please share in the comments section. Stay tuned, be true to yourself, and remember that we are the ones we've been waiting for.